of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan, created pursuant to the order of the House of December 8, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in the room to please follow the recommendations from the public health authorities as well as directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Witnesses should be aware that translation in English and French is available through the globe icon at the bottom of their screen. So please select it now so it's easier for members later on. Before we begin, I want to flag a change in schedule to the honorable members. Unfortunately, the Minister of International Development, the Honorable Harjeet Sajjan, is not available on April 11th as we had proposed. He's available to appear on April the 4th along with departmental officials. So on April 4th, we will have Minister Sean Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, with officials for the first hour, and Minister Sajjan and the officials for the second hour. Also, the Minister of National Defense is unable to appear before the committee on April the 4th as proposed in the work plan, but is available to appear on May the 9th. The minister would appear for the first hour with the Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces officials appearing for the full 2 hours. So if everyone is in agreement, clerk can confirm with minister's office. I would go to members if any of the members have any objection. If no, then I will call it carried, and I will ask respectfully, Madam Clerk, you to follow up with the ministers. Thank you. And now, on behalf of all the committee members, I would like to welcome our witnesses for our first panel this evening. And this evening we have Alison McLean, and we have Javed Tahiri, and from the 10th Church and Refugees Ministry we have Catherine Maloney, representative for Afghan families. Welcome to each of you. You will have 5 minutes for the opening remarks. So please make sure that you respect time so the members can have their time. And after the opening statements, no, okay. And it's my understanding that is it Miss McLean has the video? Okay, so that will be part of your 5 minutes as well, Madam McLean. So now let's start. So we will start with then yourself, Miss McLean. Go ahead for 5 minutes if you're ready.
Yes. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak with the group. I have spent a great deal of time in Afghanistan. I did 4 combat camera embeds with 6 NATO countries. I am currently helping to sponsor a number of families, 2 of which are in Pakistan. I have been struggling with the IRCC, of course, capabilities, etc. What I'd like to do to start off, we have a 2-minute clip from Burkas to Bullets, which I wanted to show just to bring everyone up to speed again on Afghanistan, the reason why we're here this evening, etc. So whenever the technician is able to start that, and then I will finish up with the final 3 minutes. It's just 2 minutes. So we can start it now, please.
There were quite a few male soldiers who were upset, I think, to see a female camera person. My driver told me after the fact that many of them were making threats about how they'd like to kill me because they don't like journalists, and especially female journalists. So I was not too surprised, but sadly, that's the way it is.
Since police has a very important role in the city, they are there for security. They don't have, police does not have men and women.
Gender-based violence is an ongoing problem in Afghanistan. The Taliban and ISIS target women and girls openly. The Islamic State is expanding its presence in Afghanistan, recruiting followers in nearly 75% of the country's 34 provinces. They are fighting the Taliban for control of the opium trade.
For all Afghan women, my message is that just like any human being seeks freedom and have come to this world free, I would wish the same thing for all Afghan women.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Whoop. Sorry, guys. That's the stinger at the end. Okay, one of the reasons why I wanted to show that clip is because of the continual presence of ISIS-K, the attacks at the airport that, of course, you know of, that happened in Kabul. My two families were at the airport at the time. Luckily, they were not injured. Sadly, I did have to have them go back to the airport for the attempt of a military airlift, which they were not able to get onto due to the Taliban blocking the terminal. So my main presence here this evening is because the so-called Operation Afghan Safety Program has not expedited the refugee requests. IRCC is understaffed. We are not able to get families who have been in flight for 7 months in the third countries access to Canadian embassies because the staff are overwhelmed with the requests. I have two families, as I say, that are being privately sponsored, and we have great help from Canadians and Rotarians, etc. Many of you know that Canada arrived late at the evacuation, left early with planes half full. We left our fixers and translators in limbo. The families I'm currently supporting and helping are fixers that I worked with for years, and they're in flight because they're on Taliban lists. Canada has left them stranded. The Taliban have Canadian blood on their hands. I do not believe we should be negotiating with them. Qatar should be doing a great deal more, and the UAE countries. I do not support Canada sending money to Afghanistan. The Taliban are using starvation techniques to control the population, standard war crime. And this is one of the reasons why we need to support IRCC more. We need to get money into the immigration program so families such as the ones I've been helping with Rotarians' help for 7 months will be able to get into Canada.
Thank you, Madam McLean, and thank you for your courage and your documentary. Now we will go to lawyer by profession, Mr. Javeed Taheri. Please go ahead for 5 minutes. You're on mute, Mr. Taheri.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee. I appear before you as an Afghan-Canadian lawyer who himself once was welcomed in Canada as a refugee back in the 1980s. That was when Afghanistan was actually invaded by the then Soviet Red Army, much like the tragedy we witness in Ukraine today. As a refugee lawyer in the past 20 years, I've had the honor of listening to some of the most horrific and heart-wrenching accounts narrated by Afghan refugees fleeing their homeland. Over the years, my colleagues and I have closely come to learn of the Taliban's propensity to some of the most horrendous violence imaginable, and how those targeted by the group end up being tortured and killed on the basis of no more than a mere suspicion. Therefore, when Taliban forces took power in Kabul and entered the city on August 15 of last year, we had no doubt as to the terrifying future and atrocities that awaited those who stood for democracy, freedom, gender equality, and human rights. In the weeks that followed, my colleagues and I worked around the clock, fielding hundreds of calls and emails from Afghans seeking resettlement in Canada in order to save their lives. We wrote letters to the government. We attended several high-level meetings with the ministers of the government and other officials in the aftermath of the Taliban takeover. There we put forth recommendations, discussed Canada's response. We also found ourselves on the receiving end of a flurry of inquiries from the community as to the specifics of Canada's response and how the government intended to help. However, once Canada announced its pledge to resettle 20,000 vulnerable Afghans, which was later increased to 40,000, to us in the legal community, the impediments appeared insurmountable. For one thing, requirements for Afghans to be in a third country clearly shut the door to those targeted individuals who were still inside the country and moving safe house to save their lives and evade the Taliban. Furthermore, the eligibility criteria for the special humanitarian program turned out to be extremely narrow, excluding many at-risk groups, including women fearing gender-based persecution. Under the system or program, once prospective refugees somehow do make it to a third country, then they are required to obtain UNHCR acceptance, UNHCR referral, and basically refugee recognition by the UNHCR host country. But the problem is, in none of the countries bordering Afghanistan is UNHCR actually doing that. It's not available. And none of the neighboring countries also have their own system of refugee determination. Tajikistan was the only one that was doing it before, but post-August 2021, they stopped because I guess they were overwhelmed by the flood of refugees that ended up in that country. So while Canada's special resettlement program is set up with good intention, in my respectful, humble opinion, in the current form, it is unable to respond to the crisis in Afghanistan in an effective and timely manner. What's more, the UNHCR prerequisite also makes it impossible for Canadians to resettle Afghan refugees through the programs that are designed for privately sponsorship programs, such as the Group of Five private sponsorship. There are currently hundreds, literally hundreds of groups in Canada who are ready, able, and willing to sponsor refugees, Afghan refugees from third countries, but they cannot do that because of this particular requirement for the UNHCR recognition. So this prerequisite is prohibitive and must be waived, as was done in the case of Syria back in 2015. Having said this, however, when we look at the government and how the government is utilizing simple and expeditious measures to facilitate the resettlement of Ukrainians to Canada, one starts to wonder why isn't this possible for Afghan refugees? Since August 2021, only 8,500 Afghans have been resettled in Canada out of the 40,000 pledged. For Ukrainians, we have resettled over 7,000 in the first 3 months alone since January. By comparison, Canada resettled 25,000 Syrian refugees in a matter of about 100 days, meaning when there is a will, there always is a way.
Mr. Taheri, I appreciate your presentation. Now we got to go to the next witness. We are going to the 10th Church Refugee Ministry representative for Afghan families, Catherine Maroney for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair and honourable members, I am immensely grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here representing 10th Church Refugee Ministry and the community of over 150 Afghan refugee claimants which we serve. I am from Australia. My husband Samir is from Syria. We met in Lebanon and now call Canada home. Samir is a grateful recipient of Canada's open-handed generosity to refugees. And while I have never been a refugee, as a survivor of torture, I have an abiding respect for Canada, which is internationally recognised as a place of refuge and welcome for those fleeing conflict and crisis. Indeed, today is a monumental day for us. It is the 3-year anniversary of Samir's arrival in Canada. He is now eligible for citizenship. Samir and I serve 2 refugee ministries in British Columbia where we live. He and I have formed and facilitate multiple refugee settlement teams, Church Refugee Ministry, which provides extensive settlement services and social support to Afghan refugee claimants. Indeed, some of our closest friends here in Canada are members of the Afghan community. However, at the outset, I want to acknowledge that most of my Afghan friends are themselves unable to appear before the special committee because of the extreme risk this poses to their loved ones in Afghanistan. I come, therefore, with deep humility and speak out of relationships of respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. I refer you first and foremost to the document entitled Defining Families, which contains the voices of Afghans in Canada as compiled by Journey Home Community Association and 10th Church Refugee Ministry. This is the message that the Afghan community wish the Government of Canada to hear. Building upon this document is a second, which contains recommendations for a coherent and consistent family reunification policy specific to the Afghan crisis. Canada defines family members as one's spouse and dependent children. This narrow definition places Afghan families at risk. Afghan families typically live together as multi-generational households. Thus, immediate family includes parents, siblings, and children of any age. As well as parents and unmarried siblings, other dependents include those in the household and those who are financially dependent. The Afghan definition of family matters because the Taliban target family members. The Taliban hold an entire family responsible for the actions of one family member and operate under a revenge model which requires the life of a family member in place of a person who has evaded capture. Thus, whole families face deferred risk for the actions of one family member, including a Canadian-based family member. There is, however, current precedent for expanding the definition of family. The Special Family Reunification Program offers permanent residence for extended family members of a subset of former Afghan interpreters. Under this program, extended family includes parents, siblings, and children of any age. Moreover, Afghans who assisted the Canadian government can apply to resettle their de facto dependents, where de facto dependents are defined as those who live in the same household or who are financially or emotionally dependent. Both of these initiatives more adequately reflect the reality of Afghan families. Addressing the current policy gap requires an expansion of the Special Family Reunification Program beyond interpreters. Specifically, the expanded Special Family Reunification Program should offer permanent residence for the Afghan extended family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents. In exceptional circumstances and where there is evidence of risk, the expanded Special Family Reunification Program should include de facto dependents. And to ensure fairness, processing of applications should prioritise those with evidence of risk and/or the presence of additional risk factors. In sum, Canada needs a streamlined extended family reunification policy to respond to the Afghan crisis. Expanding the definition of family for Afghan family reunification both demonstrates compassion for and cultural sensitivity to the particular risks experienced by Afghans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maloney, and also thank you for your compassionate work in the community. And we'll start with the round with the honorable members, and first and foremost, my own member of parliament, Madam Finlay, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if that makes me responsible for everything you say and do, but I'll be careful about that. Good thing we're friends. Allison, it's very good to see you again, and I know that you went 4 times, I believe, to Afghanistan and filmed there at great risk to yourself. So I have some questions, because I know you generally look through a women-focused lens. So are women who served in the Afghan Republic's security forces being targeted by the Taliban?
Yes, this is one of my disappointments in Canada. I actually watch Afghan police women and military women rise and develop in Afghanistan over a 10-year period. Sadly, Afghan police women are being hunted down and executed. Most recently, an 8-month pregnant former policewoman was dragged out of her home and executed in front of her children and neighbors. The Taliban continue the reprisal killings. I have families in hiding both in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, and they are on Taliban hit lists. And this is what's happening right now. The women are being targeted. Any woman that worked in the security forces is at risk.
Thank you. When you were embedded in Afghanistan, what signs, if any, did you see of the Taliban's resurgence and the Republic's weakness to stop it?
I documented the Taliban extensively, particularly 2010, of course, I was with Canada and the US forces. 2012, 14, 16, I was supported by 4 other countries, primarily Germany. So I was all over Afghanistan. The Taliban were, and still are, in my opinion, lockstep with ISIS-K. ISIS-K are just the extension of the Taliban. NATO forces and the intelligence services, Canadian included, for whatever reason, chose to ignore how seriously the Taliban resurgence was. In 2016, ironically, I went in with Russian forces into Kunduz, and we were able to, or they were able to push back with NATO forces the Taliban resurgence in 2016. It took all of less than a week to do that. I was with 6 different countries on that mission. However, after that moment, they should have realized that the Taliban were gaining regular footholds, and it was ignored. I don't understand why the intelligence communities worldwide and NATO-wide ignored journalists, et cetera, who are on the ground warning about this issue.
Thank you. What impact do you think the absence of female police officers under the Taliban regime will have on public safety and women's rights in Afghanistan going forward?
Well, going forward, we know already 14-year-old girls are being taken from their homes and forced into marriage. I know personally of many cases. Afghan young girls are being traded to Pakistan Taliban, and not having Afghan police women to manage domestic violence, et cetera. The Afghan police women in the past were able to manage and work with young girls, women, et cetera. That no longer exists, and it's tragic, as well as the education, of course. The schools are closed, again, after grade 6.
Any more time, Mr. Chair?
We still have 2 minutes, please.
Oh, okay. So can you share with us what the perspective is of those women, the women you've worked with, the women you still have some contact with, regarding why the Afghan Republic collapsed and how the international community should respond? Or do they feel lost right now?
No, actually, one of the most exciting things for me in documenting the rise of Afghan women in general, as well as police and military women, is that I saw a confidence that I don't think has existed in other generations. The women that I'm in continual contact with now, I am supporting, helping to support 5 families with the help of Rotary and private citizens. We're supporting a number of women in Afghanistan and girls, and they do feel betrayed. They are also very concerned by the international community even considering to support the Taliban. Qatar has, unfortunately, in my opinion, they're the architects of the destabilization of Afghanistan. They should be doing more to push education. Qatar reveres education. Girls are allowed to have education. They should be applying pressure on the Taliban, etc.
25 seconds.
25 seconds. Anything else you want to share with us? Allison.
My concern over the failure of Operation Afghan Safety, I have 2 fixers and their families at risk in Pakistan who cannot go back to Afghanistan. They are on lists, and I am struggling trying to get them to Canada, although we have housing for them and private sponsorship. This is a failure. It's unacceptable. They kept me alive.
Thank you very much, Madam Henley. Now we will go to Mr. Sidhu for 6 minutes. Mr. Sidhu, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to welcome all the witnesses here with us tonight. Thank you for sharing your insights, and I'd like to go to Ms. Maloney first in terms of, you mentioned streamlining processes for family reunification. I know in this committee we try to be very forward-looking, and I think as a committee we ought to think forward and learn from the past. So what processes do you think should be in place to help streamline things to help with family reunification? And please take your time.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure if you have received a copy of the policy recommendations that I've sent out. In that, I have detailed how we can potentially bring these processes together. Firstly, I think we already have some really great programs which just need to be expanded, and that would mean that the small subset of recipients for the current Special Family Reunification Program would be broadened to include all Canadian citizens and permanent residents who have extended family at risk in Afghanistan. And so that very program that is already in existence could be widened for all Afghan Canadians. We can also learn from the other program that is for Afghans who assisted the Canadian government. This program is a wider program and allows de facto dependence, and de facto is quite widely defined. So in certain circumstances, particularly where there's established risk, aunties and uncles or nieces and nephews who are specifically at risk should be considered under this same extended family reunification program. I do propose that because we need to have a streamlined approach and a fair approach, that we consider using the risk factors that are already in use by the Canadian government, which are particularly the Special Humanitarian Program, the 5 categories listed. So women leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, persecuted religious and ethnic minorities, and LGBTI people, but also Afghans who assisted the Canadian government. And like the rest of the programs for Afghanistan, we need to prioritize the processing of family reunification. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Tahiri, would you like to add something here? You're just on mute there.
I'm in agreement with Ms. Maloney. Family reunification can be done quite easily. The definition of family The way it is currently done in Canada, it's quite restrictive. We're a very, very small group of individuals who actually fall under, the word family. Whereas, as was stated earlier, the family in the context of the Afghan culture is quite big. But even siblings are not allowed to come, let alone aunties and uncles. We're talking about some of the people who actually live together. They were dependent on each other at home. Those people who have the means, they're in Canada. They're accepted as refugees or they're permanent residents, they're unable to assist their family members. And so there has to be a way to do this because by virtue of their connection to the West, these individuals, their family members would be targeted and are being targeted in Afghanistan. I have a lot of refugee clients from Afghanistan who arrived here in the past 6-7 months who have been accepted, but they can't sleep at night because ultimately they worry about their very close immediate family members who are still in Afghanistan, and nothing can be done to bring them to safety.
And thank you for sharing your insights, Mr. Tahiri. And Ms. McLean, I'd like to ask you a question. I know you mentioned and you shared with us the documentary with wonderful work that you're doing we're doing with the female officers in Afghanistan. You mentioned that you really don't want to see any type of money being sent to Afghanistan, and I'm well aware why. What is your belief in sending humanitarian aid? How do you think that humanitarian aid should be delivered in Afghanistan? As you know, there's a focus on, with gender-based violence, as you mentioned, and we want to make sure we support women and children. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
I absolutely support a humanitarian aid corridor that Canada funds and manages. I do not believe sending money into Afghanistan is a good thing. However, I do believe in sending, for instance, Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross. Our Canadian military is more than capable of doing a humanitarian aid drop that Canada manages and controls. There are many people like myself who know the country. I've actually been there 6 times, but 4 times with combat embeds. And the humanitarian aid aspect is essential, but we cannot be providing money to the Taliban.
Very much, Mr. Sidhu. Time is up, and we will go to Mr. Brunel Desapp. Go ahead for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses who are here to help us with this really important study. In fact, we decided to focus on the humanitarian crisis, and we have lessons to learn about how the crisis unfolded. Nevertheless, each of us who are members of this committee have decided the work of this committee has to be useful. So we want to know what we can do in the short and long term to help Afghans who are living through such a crisis. There are no words to describe it. Now, we've been doing this study for a while, and I've asked other witnesses what their number 1 priority was in terms of the recommendations we will make. Let me give you some examples. Streamlining the immigration process, the refugee process, because the paperwork is so heavy, allowing people to sponsor refugees from Canada, and having diplomatic presence in Pakistan to help Afghans make their way to Canada. Do you agree with those recommendations? And whether you are or not, what are your priorities? What's your number 1 priority that you would like to see in this report? Perhaps Mr. Tahiri first, then Ms. Maloney and Ms. McLean.
Is ensuring that the recognition for UNHCR for each refugee that be waived, eliminated. It was done in the past. In fact, this was not something that was in the law in the past. It's only in the past decade or so that this came to be, and it had we've always made exceptions in certain circumstances. The government has to treat this situation as an emergency. We need help today not 2 years from today. The government has indicated that the program, is going to be implemented in the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years. That's too long. We have the capacity to do this a lot sooner, and we don't need to have people stuck in third countries, and a never-ending saga of refugee, determination process. We could have them just the way we are doing it with the Ukrainian community. We can bring them here and then process the paperwork in Canada. That can be done. People can be issued temporary visas to come to Canada. Instead of the standard 6 months, we can extend it to a year, 2 years, and in the interim, the biometrics can be done. Whatever needs to be done in terms of paperwork, there will be support here for those refugees, potential refugees, and they can get the help that they need and the protection that they require. And this, given the circumstances and country conditions, the prima facie situation as far as refugees are concerned, we have to recognize that these people need the help from countries such as Canada, and to allow more time to pass, we're exposing a lot more people to risk, and that's not okay, in my opinion.
That's very interesting what you've just said. I don't mean to cut you off. And I'd like the other two witnesses to respond. Mr. Taheri, what you're saying is interesting. What explains the difference between the Afghan and Ukrainian crises in terms of the programs that have been put in place? Why, or rather, shouldn't these people be all treated the same regardless of which country a crisis is happening in?
I guess Canada is learning from its mistakes of the past 7-8 months. It's learning how to handle an emergency situation, and that's good. But at the same time, we should not forget, the initial crisis. We can't just, start something and then move on to the next crisis. I can't agree with the fact that Ukrainians are in need just as Afghans are. I myself am a victim of such an invasion from the same country back in the 1970s, 80s. So I understand and I feel for those people, but at the same time, we should also recognize that Afghans and Afghanistan has been in turmoil and conflict for the past 4 decades, nonstop. And so therefore, I think we all owe it to those people, particularly the ones that have, sacrificed their lives in the past 10 years for the cause of democracy, human rights. They have dedicated, committed, supported our mission.
Je veux pas vous couper, Monsieur Taheri.
Apologies, I don't want to interrupt, but I'd like the other two witnesses to respond as well.
Votre priorité, je vais revenir à vous.
Well, I'll come back to you later on then. Ladies, thank you.
Okay, you still have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so
donc vos priorités, Madame.
So what are your priorities, Ms. McLean and Ms. Maloney? Your number one priority?
My number one priority on behalf of Afghans living in Canada is that their extended family are able to join them to be safe here in Canada. And that is especially for parents, children of any age and siblings, but also where there is substantiated risk, other dependents as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brunel de Seb. We'll come back to Ms. McLean later. And now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your presentations. You're absolutely correct in the sense that Canada, when we undertook the Syrian Refugee Initiative, waived the refugee determination requirements. But however, this is not being done in this instance. And in fact, any of the refugee sponsorship from the Groups of Five process also would not get the waiver of the refugee determination process. So from that perspective, it means that people would not be able to get out within the 40,000 that the government wants to resettle. And so I hear that this is your number one priority for the government to undertake. Why do you think that the government is not proceeding with it? I actually don't understand it. I've talked to the minister a million times, it feels like, raising this issue, but they're refusing to acknowledge this and to move forward. Do you have any speculation as to why that is? And I'm going to ask the to all the witnesses, if I could please.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. McLean now. And
sure,
then
we'll start with Mr. McLean. Okay. Maybe just a quick answer so we can move through the process with others.
Yes, thank you. I believe that IRCC is completely understaffed, and our embassies, particularly in Pakistan, need to have more staff. They're overwhelmed. I have two families that have waited 2 months in Pakistan just for one interview, and that has not occurred. So it is about staffing. We need to increase the numbers. IRCC is overwhelmed, and they are not able to process the files.
Okay, Mr. Tahari?
To me, it's mind-boggling as to why the government is so firm and it's not waiving this requirement. Back in August, I actually wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister and to the other ministers involved, and it was submitted to them. And that was one of my recommendations right at the outset. And subsequently, every meeting that we've had, this issue was raised, and we were promised that likely, they will think about technicalities and they will get back to us. But so far, it hasn't been done. It would make so much sense, and it would make the work of resettling Afghans a lot easier. And most importantly, like I stated, there are a lot of Canadian groups in Canada who are willing, ready, and able to actually undertake to the cost and all the work that is needed to settle these refugees in Canada, including the cost. But,
thank you.
They can't do it because of this.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I kind of need to get to the next witness. So going to Ms. Kendaleft. Is that how I pronounce your name?
Yes, that's not official yet, but I'm going by my maiden name here. So I think the reason why Canada is not issuing temporary visas for Afghans where they are for Ukrainians is that there is a perception of badness. I think there is a fear that Afghans fleeing the Taliban may in fact be Taliban. And while that is not substantiated, I think that's the fear.
I'd like to just follow up with you, Catherine, then, if I may. One of the key issues, of course, is about family reunification, to which you have illustrated and pointed out. And actually, in fact, I'm a product of Canada's immigration process, whereby extended family could sponsor someone to come. That's what happened to me and my family back in the 1970s. And yet the government, successive governments have done away with this program. And now we're only bringing it forward on a selective basis to selected individuals. So is your number one priority saying to the government that they should expand the extended family reunification sponsorship program to Afghans as well?
Absolutely. That is the message that the Afghan community is pushing for the government, yes.
Okay. Now, one of the issues that we've heard from other witnesses is this. Many people are in Afghanistan, they can't get out, and because the requirement for the program is that you have to be in a third country, well, they can't get out to a third country. And other witnesses have indicated, though, that the Canadian government can deploy the military and other resources to help Afghans to get to safety and then into Canada. What are your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Catherine, and then we'll go up the list.
Sure, thank you. I think with regard specifically to families of Afghan Canadians here, if they are in receipt of a visa, then they are able to cross a border to Pakistan and they are able to get to Canada. So the Canadian government is able to offer safety to people who are in Afghanistan and are at risk.
Okay, 20 seconds. So I will then go to Ms. McLean, if I could.
Okay, actually, I have helped 3 families first leave Afghanistan legally through visas and passports, and then had to have them move to Pakistan because Canada does not have a presence and would not allow interviews for my refugee families from Iran, which I think is also a mistake. Iran was safe and cheaper. Pakistan is overwhelmed. We have to pay $250 every 2 months to get 2-month visas. Pakistan is not allowing longer visas for the refugees. So it's a huge cash crunch.
Thank you, Madam. Go on, you have your time. And now we'll go to Mr. Raff for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Look, my thanks to the witnesses. I don't even know where to start here. You've reaffirmed in the bad sense that just how bad things are. I've got 2 tours in Afghanistan. I know firsthand what the Taliban's capable of doing, and I know myself and you and others have been speaking out about this before Kabul even fell. And as you said, Ms. McLean, you know, it was shameful that we were the first, we arrived late and we were out early. And I just want you guys, all the witnesses, to again highlight, because I think your testimony did it phenomenally, why it's so important to get them out. I know some of you have refugees or Afghans that are already out of the country, but I really want you to, again, sort of highlight briefly on the risk that these former Afghan women are, police officers, former Afghan police, etc. You want to start, Ms. Maloney?
Sure. I don't know if there's time, but I would love to give a couple of examples. Okay. I would like to give 2 representative examples of families who could be helped if Canada introduces an expanded special family reunification program specific to the Afghan crisis. At the outset, I note that I use these examples with the permission of the Canadian-based family members of both families, and I will refrain from using names of people or organisations which could identify these families. The Canadian-based family member of Family A is an absolute delight. She is a social butterfly with a bubbly personality and a beautiful heart. She is beloved by all. She works 2 jobs and, in addition to her own family, provides financial support to multiple families in Afghanistan. When she was living in Afghanistan, the Canadian-based member of Family A held a senior role supporting literary programs throughout the country. She undertook this at great personal risk and in time was forced to flee for her life. Because she is a high-profile female leader, her family faces deferred risk of Taliban reprisals. They are also at risk due to their own activities. Indeed, this is a family of prominent women's rights activists and human rights defenders. The sisters in particular face extreme risk. The younger sister has had her activism televised nationally. Since taking over in August, the Taliban have forcibly entered and searched the family's home. Mercifully, the family narrowly escaped through a window. Around the same time, the Taliban issued the entire family with an order of execution. The family are now in hiding, and believing that they would increase their risk of capture if they remain together, they have separated in the hope that at least half of them will survive. All face extreme and immediate risk of execution if captured. Family B. The Canadian-based member of Family B is a really great guy. At first, he may come across as rather serious and formal, and he certainly is a structured thinker who ponders matters deeply. But he also has a brilliant dry sense of humour and is well respected in the community. He is a senior professional who works a second job so that he can provide for his Afghan-based family. My husband and I really enjoy spending time with him. The Canadian-based member of Family B was engaged in economic development when he was in Afghanistan, but fled to Canada when his work made him a target of Taliban reprisals. He is now a responsible Canadian citizen. His Afghan-based family are passionate about nation building, community development, and the defense of human rights. The father served for almost 2 decades as a leader in the community and a high-profile social activist who even co-founded a non-profit organization. Tragically, the father was murdered by the Taliban in 2020. The female-headed household remaining in Afghanistan is comprised of the mother and 3 adult siblings. The 3 siblings, who have all served in the non-profit organization, are well-known women's rights activists and human rights defenders. In response, the Taliban have issued a letter to the non-profit which condemns all workers to death. Moreover, the daughter, who has additional vulnerabilities, is now facing an imminent forced marriage by an influential family who have the support of the Taliban. Her brothers have been threatened with death if they don't hand their sister over to a marriage which is against her wishes. Because of the multiple and immediate threats to their lives, the 2 brothers are now in hiding and living separate from their mother and sister who are housebound. Their situation remains extremely precarious.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Maloney, for highlighting the importance of getting these people out of Afghanistan now.
Thank you, Mr. Raff, and we'll go to Mr. Baker for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for your testimony here today. Ms. Maloney, I wanted to, if I may, follow up on what you were just saying. You were talking about Family B, and forgive me if I misunderstood the specific circumstances, but I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how we could help Family B, in your view.
In my view, this family and all Afghan families who are at risk should have the capacity to be resettled in Canada. The current situation is that they cannot be reunified because they are parents and siblings, and therefore they don't fall under the classification of family reunification. But if we were to extend the definition of families for the Afghan crisis, with specific to family reunification, this family and other families in similar situations could find safety in Canada and be supported by their Canadian-based family member.
And Ms. Maloney, the Family B that you were describing, are they currently in Afghanistan?
They are, yes.
Yeah. Is there, if the change were made that you're talking about, would this, tell me a little bit about the process. Could this family leave Afghanistan safely?
They could legally or illegally leave, but it would be substantially helped if the Canadian government were to issue a temporary visa for this family.
Okay. And would the issuing of the temporary visa, I guess what I'm wondering about, and I'm genuinely asking for your help just to understand, is how would they make their way out of Afghanistan? Presumably, I'm thinking they would need to make their way to a bordering country. Am I right? Help me understand a little bit some of that aspect of things.
That's correct. Of course, the travel would be dangerous. Of course, there are people actively searching for them to kill them, and yet it is possible. And neighboring countries have the authority to let families through if they do have a visa that will secure their onward journey.
What were to happen if the family doesn't, like if the family doesn't have the visa and chooses to leave to a bordering country? What happens if they arrive at that border checkpoint without that visa?
There is substantial risk to that family. And even if they are to make it out to a neighboring country, some countries are removing Afghan refugees after a maximum of 3 months, which means that if they are removed back to Afghanistan, they face an incredible risk because they will be handed back directly to the Taliban. So many families are actually not fleeing because of the risk of being sent back after a short period of time. So they're needing to secure safe passage to countries like Canada so that they can make the onward journey.
Okay. And tell me a little bit, again, I'm just going to continue to pursue this aspect of what families would have to go through. Is there a, we've talked a little bit about, you've spoken a little bit about the country that they would be traveling to. What about the Taliban in Afghanistan? Are there exit requirements? Like, how would that work? How does that aspect of things work? What do people have to go through to leave Afghanistan? And I'm talking about from the perspective, we've talked about the journey, but also at the border. Is the Taliban guarding the borders? What's that process look like?
Thank you. Yes, there is risk both to get to the border and at the border. It's a harrowing journey for people to make, knowing that they are on hit lists, knowing that they are being hunted, and if they are identified, they can be killed. So it is an incredibly difficult journey, but one that many families choose to make in the hope that they can be resettled.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. And for 2.5 minutes, we'll go to Mr. Brunel Desapp. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Écoutez, c'est intéressant là, ce qui vient de se dire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was very interesting. Many of you mentioned that when these people cross the border, they go through a nightmare, and that nightmare does not end. And each neighboring country has their own rules. So would these people's safety be better guaranteed if Canada had people on the ground? Ms. Maloney, maybe you can answer that question.
Sorry, I think my colleague actually was not
Oh, ben oui,
wanting to
Monsieur
respond.
Tahiri, allez-y, vous avez de l'air.
Go ahead. You can answer that question.
Allez-y, Monsieur Tahiri.
Mr. Tahiri, go ahead.
Well, yeah, definitely. The problem with the third countries is that after a certain amount of time, they will be deported. They would not extend their stay in that country, and so while they're waiting, they'll be sent back and given, basically handed back to the Taliban. In fact, I had one individual who was a single mom with 2 children. They fled to Iran. They were deported back from Iran. Luckily, they were able to bribe some people at the border, and so they would not hand it to the Taliban. And but they still managed to get in the country and somehow get back. And they slipped out of the country back to Pakistan, from where they managed to get out. So it's a very, very, as mentioned, harrowing journey, very dangerous, fraught with all kinds of risks. So if there was a possibility of helping people while in the country and assisting them, providing them some kind of mechanism to get out, using temporary visas and so on, it would be just unbelievably amazing. It would save so much time and so many lives, for sure.
Mais ça prend.
But that requires having staff on the ground. If we want to do that, Canada needs to have staff in those third countries. Isn't that what you're asking for? I think that's what's in the recommendation. Am I right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel Desapp. I appreciate it. And now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes, please.
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions. One is, when you speak of the temporary residence visa, do you mean a temporary residence permit, to which it is something that the minister can authorize and issue to individual families that are particularly at risk? If the minister did that, they would have a travel document to try to get to safety. So I just want to clarify that, and I have another question quickly to ask. So I'll first go to Ms. Maloney, and then I'll go to Mr. Tahiri.
That's absolutely the case. and I have applied for ministerial interventions, and I am awaiting a response.
What's that?
For these two families, actually. But I do think that we need to roll this out a little bit more widely than having the minister having to authorize all of these. It needs to be a more streamlined approach.
Sorry, I'll just kick in very quickly. In previous humanitarian crises that's happened, the minister actually has the authority to broadly authorize temporary residence permit to all the people in that particular country to access them. So it's not a one by one sort of process. This is what you mean, right? For the government, for the minister to issue temporary residence permit broadly to Afghans who need to get to safety.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Tahari, very quickly, and I think I'm almost out of time.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. The minister does have the authority to authorize such a TRP issuance with respect to a particular population, in terms of emergency, settlement or situations of crisis such as this. But TRV or TRP, travel visas or permits, either way, would assist Afghans to get to Canada and follow up with the rest of the process while in this country.
Yeah, TRVs. The problem with TRVs is the arduous process. Even with the Ukrainian situation, people have to go and get their biometrics and do all of that kind of stuff, which is actually hugely problematic. So I think maybe TRP would be more expedited. Yeah. I want to very quickly ask, though, that currently, as it stands right now, people who submitted a request for assistance to get to safety, such as Ms. Mahoney, the cases of your two families, you submit an application in, and then you don't hear anything. Because that's what I'm seeing right now, that people are not getting a response at all from the government. You're not getting a file number. You're not getting a G number. You're just stuck in the system in the middle of nowhere. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's a significant limitation.
Thank you, Madam Kwan, and appreciate. And on behalf of all the members of Parliament, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today and for their contributions. Thank you, and we'll suspend for a few minutes to prepare for the second panel. Meeting suspended.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
back to order. I would like to welcome our second panel this evening. On behalf of the committee members, I welcome Ms. Sally Armstrong, and former this journalist by profession, and former chairperson, Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, Human Rights Watch, Seema Samar. Couldn't make it. And we have with us the Associate Women's Rights Director, Ms. Heather Barr. On behalf of the committee, as I welcome you, and you will have 5 minutes each, and please respect the time. And I would start with Ms. Armstrong for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Merci de m'inviter.
Thank you very much for having invited me to take the floor this evening.
Among the last to speak, and I'm pretty pleased about that, although I don't usually like being last. But in the last few days, we have managed to see evidence, very clear evidence, that the Taliban have not moderated. They are the same hateful, misogynist, mostly illiterate thugs that they were when I first met them soon after they took over in 1996. I am a journalist. I covered them then, and I have covered Afghanistan ever since. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to address your committee tonight, to bring facts as I know them that you can deliberate. I have 3 points to make: the Taliban, the Afghans, and the Canadians. First, the Taliban. They were born out of a system that was created by misery and poverty. They were educated at madrasas in Pakistan, where they learned hatred and misogyny. They couldn't govern then when they took over in 1996, and they cannot govern now. But this time they sold themselves as moderated. And they did that to a world that had been coached by the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, and his gang to begin to overlook Afghanistan. But I can tell you that from mid-August, when they strutted into Kabul, my social media platforms, my WhatsApp and Messenger, have been filled with mind-jarring videos of what the Taliban are doing, whipping young women, handing the whip man to man to man around a circle while she screams for mercy and suffers the pain of the whipping. And besides that, the Taliban, as they took each village, they demanded a list of all the girls over the age of 14 and all the widows under the age of 44 to give to their soldiers, because according to them, they're allowed 4 each that God told them that they had the right to have. These are the miscreants that the former American president, Donald Trump, negotiated with. And his actions in ignoring the Afghan government, which certainly had problems of its own, but in elevating these thugs as conquerors, whipped them into a frenzy to make demands such as releasing hardened criminals, murderers, into the community. And also they kept saying they'd moderated their views, although whenever you asked, how do you now view Sharia law, they wouldn't answer the question. And you know, pundits refer to the Taliban as a rigid version of Sharia law. That's not so. There's not a word in the Quran to support what the Taliban have done. Then and now, what they've done is they've hijacked their own religion for political opportunism. And they got away with it then, and they're getting away with it now. And what do they do with it? They thrash girls to show that they're serving God. And the only difference today is that they've been joined by discontented jihadis from around the world, men who couldn't give a fig about the Geneva Conventions or for military codes of conduct. So let's talk about the Afghans. Imagine saying the Afghans couldn't defend themselves. You know, it makes me think that in 1 year, the scientists found a vaccine to save all the people in the whole world. But in 20 years, their politicians and the politicians from the countries who came to presumably help them could not find the path to peace. How can anyone blame those innocent people who were totally sold out by their warlords, by their tribal leaders, by their own government, and frankly, by all of us? Now, let's talk about the Canadians, the true North. You know, it's been said that our 20 years there was a failure. Well, I can tell you something about those 20 years. I can tell you that while your tax dollars were at work, the life expectancy in Afghanistan went from 47 years to 63 years. That's not a failure, that's a miracle. But then when they were in trouble and we all went away, we all said, well, you're on your own now. Canada said, we'll take the vulnerable ones, we'll take them fast, and over time we'll take 40,000. That didn't happen. It didn't happen because IRCC either were incompetent in doing their job or chose not to do their job. And there's so many excuses. One of them said to me, well, we're not digitalized, you know. In 2022, well, that's pretty shameful. Or we're overworked, or we're overwhelmed. None
Much,
of these are
Madam
excuses.
Armstrong, your time is up, and
Okay.
we'll come back to you. And I would love to welcome former chairperson of Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, Human Rights Watch, Ms. Seema Samar. Ms. Seema Samar, you have exactly 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please go ahead. You're on mute, is it? Good. No, we can't hear you, and you are mute on the wire, maybe. Can you speak again? Just let me check if it works. Now
do you hear me?
We hear you, but let me reset the watch. Okay, and
Okay.
here we go. Stop, reset, and go. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Seema Samar, a medical doctor by training, but I spent all of my life defending human rights and fighting for equality for women in my country. Among my other responsibility, I was the first Minister of Women's Affairs after the 2001 fall of the Taliban and served as the chairperson of Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission for 17 years. Afghanistan has been at war for 44 years. It begins with the coup by the pro-USSR in Afghanistan, and then the military invasion of 1979 of the USSR, and the war continues with the Taliban military takeover of Afghanistan for second time. Unfortunately, the Western and Arab countries choose the most conservative group of Afghans to train, equip, and support and to fight against communism. Women became the main victim of war since they were not carrying an active element of the war, carrying gun and active element of the war. They were not seen as necessary to be included in decision-making and experience restriction on their freedom and rights. We witnessed the killing of our loved ones, destruction of our property, and our social fabric, forced displacement, and the degradation of our position in society during the past years of conflict. However, we still stand for our rights and freedom and struggle to protect our human dignity in these most difficult times. You have all watched the scary scenes in Afghanistan after the Taliban took over in the media and social media, but the situation is so much worse than what you see. Most of the time, I cannot find words to describe it. Imagine the level of desperation to sell your children or your organ to feed the rest of the family. Afghanistan is a collective failure of Afghan government, Afghan people, and international community. It has been a failure of accountability, rule of law, justice, and commitment for human rights. 20 years of international community engagement give some space for improvement of human rights and women's rights, and space to exercise the basic democratic political rights in Afghanistan. However, these advancements for women's rights and human rights were sacrificed for political advantage in Afghanistan and abroad. History has shown that if you want to destroy a nation, you do three things. First, you make half of the population inferior to second-class citizen. In this way, you start the mentality of male superiority in the women or inferior in the family, which then transfer to the whole society, including at the political leadership. Second, you destroy the education system in the country. People who wants to control the population, of course, they can easily control the uneducated people. The third action that you to destroy a nation is to devalue the value and principle of human rights, equality, and rule of law. When there is no respect for human rights and rule of law, then violation of human rights become a daily practice. During this violent conflict, the people in my country have been caught between the extreme left, which is pro-USSR and communism, and the extreme right, which is Taliban. Currently, the people who are in power practically ignoring the Afghanistan obligation on the Human Rights Convention that was ratified by Afghanistan. The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is very serious. Many have been displaced. People cannot find food or shelter. Most have no income and access to job opportunity. The humanitarian crisis got worse with governance crisis, and economic crisis, on top of the drought and COVID pandemic, which already had devastated the people. So my recommendation is humanitarian aid is a temporary solution to save the life, but there is a report of unequal distribution of relief program. Some of the Hazara district are receiving very little, as the Hazara headed NGOs were not included on the distribution. There has been no transparent and equal distribution of relief program for the people in need. There should be no tolerance for corruption or discrimination. Women should be involved in all levels, on the policy, on the distribution, and receiving of the aid, and also people with disability and people who are internally displaced. Third, human rights values and principles should not be negotiated away. Under any circumstances, respect for culture, religion, and even sovereignty of a country should not be used as an excuse. Four, accountability and justice should be part of the agenda pressed with the Taliban. One of the reasons for our collective failure is lack of attention to issues of accountability and justice for international crimes, which has promoted a culture of impunity, not only in
Thank you
Afghanistan, but also
very much,
in other
Madam
countries.
Smar, and your time is up.
Thank
We'll
you.
come back to you. And now we'll go to Ms. Bar for 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for holding this hearing, and thanks for inviting me. If I look a bit sleepy, it's because it's 4:30 in the morning in Pakistan where I am, but I felt like I couldn't miss a chance to talk with you. The situation in the human rights situation in Afghanistan, as Dr. Samar has said, is deteriorating from extremely bad to even worse, with new signs every day of this, including extrajudicial killings and abductions, censorship and intimidation of the media, and violations of women's rights. As you know, on Wednesday, the Taliban extended the ban on girls' secondary education. On Friday, they began blocking women from leaving the country without a male family member escorting them. On Sunday, they segregated the parks and blocked foreign media. The Taliban are systematically violating women's rights to work, study, protest, speak, travel, access healthcare, live free from violence, and have a political voice. And there's no reason to think that there aren't more crackdowns coming. So I want to talk about what Canada, as a country with a feminist foreign policy, should do in this crisis. As you know, Canada is one of 4 countries that sent troops to Afghanistan in the last 20 years, and that also has a feminist foreign policy. The others are France, Germany, and Sweden. And these 4 countries have a special responsibility to Afghan women and girls. The crisis happening in Afghanistan right now is the most serious women's rights crisis in the world. It's the most serious women's rights crisis the world has faced since 1996, when the Taliban took over the last time. If feminist foreign policy doesn't mean standing with Afghan women right now in this crisis, it begs the question of what feminist foreign policy means and risks the conclusion, not much. For the last 7.5 months, there's been inadequate leadership, inadequate coordination, and inadequate political will globally applied to defending women's rights in Afghanistan. The Taliban's actions in the last week should help drive greater political will and coordination. But many have been looking to the United States for leadership. It's clear now that leadership is not coming from that quarter. It's time for the countries that have pledged to have a feminist foreign policy, including Canada, to fill that gap. There aren't any easy solutions, but there are actions that Canada can and should take. First, I listened to your previous panel talking about resettlement of Afghans, and it's absolutely clear that Canada should urgently assist Afghans who can't live safely in Afghanistan to resettle, and Canada should urge other countries to do the same. And people at heightened risk include human rights defenders, including women's rights defenders, women who were in high profile and non-traditional roles, members of the LGBT community, and journalists. Here in Pakistan, I hear every day from Afghans who are trying to make their way to safety, some of whom are still in Afghanistan, some of whom are stranded here in Pakistan, and many of whom sound suicidal. Some of them are specifically waiting on Canada and waiting and waiting. And Canada has the power to help them to survive this crisis and rebuild their lives. But I also want to talk about how do you help make life bearable for people in Afghanistan. The international community needs to take a set of coordinated steps together, and Canada should be a leader in that process. Those steps are 4 steps. First is deny the Taliban legitimacy, end the exemption on the travel ban for their leaders, stop having meetings with them outside Afghanistan, end high-level meetings, end photo ops with them, and only send delegations to meet them that are at least half women and include Afghan women. Second point is do everything possible to protect human rights defenders, including the women and girls and men who are coming out to protest the secondary school ban. Speak up immediately and loudly when activists are abused, abducted, or detained. Third is adjust your funding decisions. Don't fund discrimination. Fund only programs, for example, parts of the education system that equally serve women and men and girls and boys, and invest in alternative education to assist girls who've been shut out of school. Then the fourth point, my last point on that, is don't punish all Afghans for Taliban abuses. Dr. Samar has talked about the humanitarian crisis. People are starving in Afghanistan because of decisions made in the White House and other foreign capitals, and donors must do everything possible to meet the humanitarian needs and to unblock Afghanistan's economy so that it can function while also maintaining pressure on the Taliban over human rights. The tragedy unfolding for women and girls in Afghanistan right now has risks for all of us. If the Taliban can do this with little international response, it will embolden enemies of women's rights everywhere, in this region, in your region, everywhere. Feminist foreign policy has to mean feminist solidarity. And right now, the people who need Canada's solidarity most desperately are Afghan women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barr, and speaking to us from all the way from Pakistan. And now we will proceed to the rounds of questions. And first, we will go to Mr. Raff for 6 minutes again. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again to the witnesses for clearly highlighting just how urgent it is for Canada to step up and do what we can to help these Afghan women and children and all Afghans that are in dire need, those human rights defenders. I agree with you, Ms. Armstrong. 20 years, we did make a difference in that there are women and girls, there's a whole generation that got an opportunity that they never did before, and I honestly believe that some of them down the road will help take Afghanistan to the next step. So that's the seed of, I guess, optimism, if I can have any optimism with just how terrible the situation is. My first question is to you, Ms. Barr, though. It's about Pakistan, where you're situated, and the importance of, the pressure, I guess, that's coming. Would you say, is there pressure within Pakistan itself about the safety network there for those Afghans that are getting out, that they're either being turned back? Is the Taliban putting pressure on through their networks to try to get some of these, to target these individuals that the previous witnesses talked about those hit lists, those lists that are out there where they're going after these human rights defenders, these targeted minorities, etc. Can you just expand a bit about how important it is to be urgent and even the situation in Pakistan in support?
So, I mean, I've definitely heard from people who fled Afghanistan because they were unsafe there and who also have felt unsafe in Pakistan. I have to say that I think the biggest difficulty that Afghans in Pakistan are facing is that they can't live here. You know, other witnesses have talked about how you only get a 60-day visa. You're in this constant cycle of trying to renew your visa. If you don't have a valid visa, you can't rent a place to live. You can't get a SIM card. You can't actually leave the country without getting a special permission to leave the country if you're undocumented. And people are looking at a situation. People have made it here and they have no pathway to any other country. And so they're living permanently in this situation. They can't send their kids to school. They can't work. And I think many Afghans are actually going back to Afghanistan because they're running out of money and they can't feed themselves. And at least if they go back to Afghanistan, they have hopefully family members who will take them in. So that's the biggest problem, is that they can't actually survive here.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Barr. My next question to you, Ms. Samar, would be, you made a number of recommendations, and I guess my question is, how do you actually implement some of those, you know, with the unequal relief that's going to different minorities, how, you know, the women, the education side of the house? I'm just concerned, I guess, you know, I guess I'm pessimistic, having been there myself, on the ability to actually influence and enforce that, and it's why I think we need to be doing more to get people out. Can you just expand on how you think we could actually do your first two recommendations?
I think one, it is really important to work on a mechanism to monitor properly. And that can be done through UN and NGOs who are working in the field from that local community. The second point is that, okay, we are over to that very serious situation of humanitarian crisis, but now we should try to involve. It should be a condition to Taliban also that the international community will not give the humanitarian relief to the people unless there's a woman who are making decision and who are responsible for delivery, and also who are receiving it. And they have to accept, and they will accept, because it's a lot of pressure by people on them. I think that is really important. The second point that I insist that the international community should really be strong on human rights, because as Haider Barr said, or my colleague, I'm both of them as my friend and my colleague, is that we worked hard in order to implement some of the principles of human rights in Afghanistan. That is all gone. If Taliban wants to be recognized by the international community, they have obligation and they have to accept human rights. And there should not be negotiation on human rights with Taliban. It should be clear. And also the third point that I again insist on it's accountability and justice for the crimes they committed. Arbitrary killing, torture every day, arbitrary arrest, and also the violation of human rights. The only country in the world who officially banned on girls' education is Afghanistan. Is that acceptable? Is that cannot be counted as a war crimes against humanity?
Yeah, look, I'm still, I guess, almost cynical about just the Taliban, whether they care, right? It's the challenge I think we have is we need to step up and we need to do more to get these people out. Ms. Armstrong, there's only about a half a minute left. If you could just expand a bit on just what you were talking about right off the get-go, just the fact that Taliban haven't changed, they're going to go back to their old ways, and just how terrible and dangerous the situation is.
Muted.
And your time is almost up, and if you can be brief, please. You're on mute, Ms. Armstrong. Okay.
There. Okay, I'll make one comment. IRCC has to get up to speed. They've got to do the job they're supposed to do. And in this country, those excuses are just not good enough. We are not getting vulnerable people out because our people are not doing their job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapp. And we will move to Mr. Al-Khoury for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses tonight. Recently, we found out that the Taliban regime is going to forbid young girls from going to school, and that some parents are selling their minor daughters for money. And to me, that's a crime against humanity. We also know that women's rights are not respected over there.
And I ask my question, with all respect to Madame Armstrong, when you end your comment by saying either the IRCC is incompetent or they don't choose to do so, I categorically refute that, and I could assure you that they are very competent and they have the will, a strong will to do so. But let me give you some of the issues. First of all, you know, if you compare to Syria or to Ukraine, the situation is not the same. Getting out of Afghanistan is a terrible process. In Syria, they were recognized by the United Nations Refugee Commission. And you know very well, in Afghanistan, more than 2.6 million personnes sont déplacées. Et le Canada est la...
Canada has welcomed the highest number of refugees from these displaced people. Canada became a world leader and has been for more than 3 years. So Canada has a role to play. But for the Department of Immigration, we need to remember that Canadians' safety is a priority. So can you guarantee that if we accelerate, if we speed up the process, and if we let anyone come into the country, can we guarantee that there won't be members of ISIS or Taliban who will enter this country and cause security issues for Canadians? This is what the Minister of Immigration and all officials are trying to mitigate. Now, here's my question. To help these girls and women and to reduce the number of displaced people and the number of refugees, what can the international community do? Can you name a country, a single country who has done more for Afghans than Canada?
Because I agree with what you said. This is our wheelhouse. Canada is terrific at this. We've shown it over and over again. Communities across this country, spiritual centers can do it. But I can tell you, sir, that I have been trying to get Afghans out of Afghanistan since August. And I have a paper trail as long as you like to show IRCC does not respond or asks a question and then doesn't respond. They don't issue the letters required. They simply are not doing the job they're supposed to do. And you seem to be angry that I'm pointing that out. Well, I can imagine how upset people are whose lives are at risk, and they're getting these nonsensical forms and they're not getting a reply. And I don't understand why that is happening. I have had meetings with people there who say, we're overwhelmed, we have too much work, then hire more people. I feel your anger with what I said, but I stand by what I said. Canadians are good at this. We are, I dare say, the best in the world at bringing in people, resettling them, restarting their lives. But if we can't get them here, then we can't do that for them. And I believe that the government needs to put a great deal of attention and effort, and if it takes money, into IRCC so they can do the job that Canadians expect them to do.
I'm sorry to say I'm not angry at all, but I'm giving you fact, I'm giving you reason, the responsibility of our government, and I ask you, give me a name of one single country in the world did more than Canada. And I gave you a number, about the 2.6 million Afghan displaced, what Canada did. Anyway, question number 2 for you, Madame, also. Quel pourrait être pour
For Afghanistan and for the surrounding region, what would be the potential consequences of forbidding women from taking part in political or economic and social life? And what do you think the international community's role is? And can you tell us whether Canada has been a leader?
That's who we are. We've said we are that community that can promote women into those positions so they can be part of the living country. And there have got to be ways. You know, sir, I wish I could say to you, this is what you need to do. This, and this, and we solve the whole problem. What I do feel is that we should put people together in a room who know what to do, who like those scientists have new ideas and got a vaccine in a year. Get people together. Clearly, what we're doing isn't working. I mean, we have a lot of evidence around the world right now, Ukraine being a perfect example. We need people who are aware as you are of policies and aware as Dr. Samar is of situations on the ground and as Heather Barr is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alcoy. Your time is up, and we will proceed to Mr. Brunel de Sepp for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who are with us tonight for this very important study. I do not think that witnesses are here to get lectured. I think that we are all here to make sure that this study's focus, which is the humanitarian crisis and what we can do in the short or long term. So everything else is more important than any partisan comments. So, Ms. Armstrong, you heard what my colleague, Mr. El-Khoury, has been saying. But now I have a question for you. What should we prioritize in this report? This report is very instrumental because it will explain what we need to do now to help Afghans and how Canada can help them. So what are the priorities? So I'm asking you this question first, then to Ms. Samar and Ms. Barr.
La question, c'est pour Dr. Simon.
So the question is to Dr. Samar.
Qui devrait se retrouver.
So what are the priorities? What are the recommendations?
Dr. Samar?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Madame Samar, allez-y.
Yes, go ahead.
Quelle est votre priorité? Est-ce qu'il y a un problème?
What are your priorities? Is there a problem with interpretation, Mr. Chair? I think that I'm losing time.
Oh, I will take care of you.
Madame Samar, quelle est...
Ms. Samar, what are the priorities that we should formulate as recommendations in the report that this committee is going to produce? What are your priorities?
I think support to education program in any level, in all the political and also funding level. Number two, particularly focusing on women and girls, because I believe education is the strongest tool to fight against the ignorance. Number two, I think support the access to health services, including reproductive health and access to contraception, because we really need to reduce the number of the children in order to reduce the firewood for the terrorist groups. Number three, I think we all need to have a honest, comprehensive assessment of what have been done wrongly or what is gone wrong in order to have a better coordinated long-term strategy for a country like Afghanistan. Four, again, the problem in Afghanistan will not stay in our boundary walls. It will reach anywhere.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. And Ms. Barr, I am going to ask you what your priorities are, but since you are a member of an NGO that is on the ground, I would like to have your opinion. Some NGOs came here and told us that it was difficult to do their job because the Taliban are considered as a terrorist entity. They are afraid of getting sued or getting sent to court because of our criminal code. So can you tell us how the situation is for you as an NGO on the ground, and how can we fix things for you?
Thank you so much. I mean, I'll answer first sort of, what my first priority would be. I mean, I would really like to see Canada reaching out to France, Germany, and Sweden and working together to say, okay, we're gonna step in and guide where feminist foreign policy should be taking global policy for all countries on Afghanistan. And I think it's worth mentioning how much consensus there is across countries about the fact that what the Taliban is doing on women's rights and other human rights is beyond the pale. We've seen condemnations over the school ban from the OIC, from Turkey, from Qatar. Everyone agrees what's missing is leadership, and I want those four countries to provide that. In terms of your question about operating on the ground, so we don't actually have anyone in country, and we're having a very hard discussion about whether we can go or not, because the risk is not to us, but to people that we would talk to. And we're very afraid that if we went and interviewed people and did research in Afghanistan, that the Taliban would retaliate against people that we spoke with, and we would have no ability at all to protect them. So that's one of the constraints that we're facing, more than the issue about them being classified as a terrorist group. But that's a very hard thing to figure out. So for the moment, we've been doing our research remotely in ways that still bring a lot of security challenges, because we're seeing sort of a lot of concerns about monitoring of people's phones and social media and so on and so forth. So it definitely feels like there's a net tightening in some very frightening ways.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Barr.
Thank you, Ms. Barr. And I don't know if you know that problem, but there are some NGOs who told us here at this committee that if they work with the Taliban, because they are officially a terrorist group in Canada, they could be taken to court and pursued due to our criminal code. Are you also facing that problem?
So we are not facing that problem because we're not delivering aid, but I do think that that's a serious problem, and it's one that the Canadian government can address and should address. I think that it's important for all governments and the UN to make it clear that anyone who's delivering humanitarian assistance and other important aid is not going to be subject to sanctions, because they have no choice but to engage with the Taliban in delivering that type of assistance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Duceppe, and I will go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the panelists. Those were just exceptional presentations from all of you. I'd like to first ask, in terms of helping Afghans get to safety, we've heard from the previous panel and other witnesses that one of the key barriers is the fact that the Canadian government requires refugee determination from the UNHCR, and it's impossible for people to get because there are no UNHCR offices operating there. So would you support the call for the government to waive the refugee determination requirement for Afghans? And I will go through, I guess, Ms. Barr first, but I'd like to have all the witnesses answer this question.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I mean, I went through this process myself, trying to assist one particular family with trying to get help from UNHCR here in Islamabad. And you go to the website and it says you can't come to their office without an appointment. It says to get an appointment, you have to call a particular number. I called that number 29 times. Most of the time it just rang and no one answered. 3 times someone answered and hung up on me. And so, I'm a privileged white American lawyer who works for an NGO. So I tweeted about it, and somebody sent me a phone number for their friend who works at UNHCR, and I was able to get an appointment that way. But that's not a route available to an Afghan who comes and doesn't necessarily speak English or Urdu and can't get a SIM card if they haven't got a valid visa. It's impossible. And another friend of mine was similarly trying to help a family to get to UNHCR so that they could register. She said she was calling the same number and she got through the 258th time that she called. So that's a completely unworkable system that's set up to stop people from accessing it. And absolutely, Canada should waive that requirement. Thanks.
Thank you. To Ms. Samar, same question.
Yes, thank you very much. I fully agree with Madam Barr. But I think the other solution would be to have more staff for UNHCR in those countries where we have a lot of refugees, if the first one is not possible. But I think I'll go for the first part, that if they waive that. And it's really the staff of the Human Rights Commission and well-known human rights defenders are still in the country with a lot of risk that they are taking, unfortunately. But some people who has not been at risk and they already evacuated. So that should be kind of a very honest and thorough kind of a program run by Canada or any other countries who are really trying to help.
Thank you.
And I think young women are more at risk. That is very, very clear. In the minority group who are facing challenges and attacks every day.
Thank you. And to Ms. Armstrong.
I could tell the same story. It began in August. You would be getting 100 requests a day. That went through all the way till October. People are asking, begging. You're sending, working. I'm working with Journalists for Human Rights. I'm working with the military people, trying to get people out. And it is simply not good enough. We can do better than this. And the idea of just let them get here and sort out or even get to a lily pad country and sort out the biometrics later. It is a better way to proceed. But I still say we need to go to IRCC and find out what's wrong. Something's wrong. I have all their documents. I have all these letters.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just not acceptable.
Well, part of the problem, as I understand it, is this. People send in to the special number or email that the government has provided to them. And then unless if you fall into the categories of what the government wants to target, you won't actually get a response. And in cases where even for human rights advocates and activists, they're not getting a response. We just heard from a previous panel, 2 families that I'm trying to assist, and I've sent letters to both the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Immigration, and I have not gotten a response. And so here's the problem. The government is not responding to these individuals. They're not getting a file number. Sometimes you get a response that comes back to say, I can't help you with those families because there are no file numbers. Well, they can't get a file number because IRCC won't respond to them. And so we're walking around in a giant circle of getting nowhere. Is that the problem that you're experiencing? Maybe I can start with Ms. Armstrong.
100%. And you know, I don't like knocking my mic. I think I'm very proud of this country, and this does not make me proud. Why don't we fix the problem? It's wrong. We need to fix it.
Ms. Barr?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know details about how the Canadian system works, but I just want to say there's something extremely arbitrary about who got out and who didn't. And as Dr. Samar says, there are many high-profile human rights activists who are still trapped in the country. And it's just because they decided not to go to the airport in late August, or they tried to go to the airport and they couldn't get into the airport. They thought, like, let me give it a bit of time and see what happens. They thought, I'm safer hiding in my house and I'll try to go in a few weeks. And we know now that was for many people the only opportunity, and they've missed it now.
Ms. Barr, sorry, I'm just going to interject here because I only have 30 seconds left. I want to ask you a very direct question because you're in Pakistan right now. The government says that people should get to a third country, but because people can't get out from Afghanistan to Pakistan, what about if the government actually had resources available in Pakistan to help people to get out, help Afghans to get out to Pakistan? Would that be an option?
There's definitely a need for much more support here. That would need to be negotiated with the Pakistan government, which might be challenging, but it's certainly worth a try.
Thank you, Madam Kwan. And without wasting any more time, we go to Mr. Redikoff for 3 minutes, please. And then Madam Pam Damop, and then Mr. Bruno Desai for a minute and a half, and Madam Kwan for a minute and a half. Go ahead, please, Mr. Redikoff.
Thank you, Chair. You know, even though we're far away from it here in Canada, MPs get kind of drawn into this too. And I have an example I just want to read. It was a letter that I received. Please save my life and my family. We are in a bad mental and physical condition, and I live in a secret place in a bad security situation. House-to-house searches have begun in different parts of Afghanistan, and it's possible for us to be captured and killed by the terrorist Taliban at any moment. I sent an email to your country's immigration office. Only one email came in, and no other confirmation email came to reassure me and my family. Please, please, please save me and my family. And that was sent directly to me. And so, Ms. Armstrong and Ms. Barr, you both gave some examples similar to this, and this is not an uncommon situation from what I can see. Ms. Armstrong, I saw you quoted as saying, "I'm not one who likes to criticize my government," and you just actually mentioned that. I think governing is a hard job, and they're in the business of trying to please most of the people all the time, and that's very tough to do. But what happened here was a neglect of duty, end quote. Just wondering if you could comment a bit more on that. How much of what we're seeing here is created by the Taliban versus how much of this is neglect of duty, and what are your thoughts on that?
You know, the Taliban are not going to help you to solve this problem. So I don't think, training them, teaching them, scaring them to death, promising them something isn't going to do it. We know how to fix this problem. And as all of us have told you, the same letter that you just read, it's the incompleted communication. It's leaving people hanging. It's having people write to us and say, "What's wrong with me? How come you're not?" We all know of a very delicate case, which I won't go into details of, but underage girls that we were trying to move out. It took Canada 3 months to get the paperwork done, and just enough time for the story to spread around and those girls to get caught by the Taliban. This is not acceptable for our country. We know how to do this well. And instead of even just blaming IRCC, we have to go in there and fix it. This is not acceptable for Canada.
Well, another question related to that. One of the things I've heard from different people is that there is risk that if we bring people from Afghanistan too quickly, we might get some terrorists in Canada, and that's a fear that people in Canada have. Can you comment on that, please?
You know what? You could say that with every single refugee program we've ever instigated. Why are they picking? The terrorists are running Afghanistan. They're not trying to come here. I think that is a very poor and weak and wrong conclusion to draw in the face of vulnerable people who need us to help them. I'm very sorry to hear that, and I've heard it many times.
And I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because that would be my feeling as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Redikoff. Right on time. And now we'll go to Madam Damop for 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Armstrong, well, all our witnesses, thank you for everything that you've been doing. Ms. Armstrong, Ms. Barr had said that we should resettle those who can't live safely in Afghanistan, except that we know that all of the women and girls can't live safely in Afghanistan, and we can't resettle every single woman and girl in Afghanistan right now. You've been working on the ground through the repression of women's rights to, going full circle and being able to see women go to school and be members of parliament. And now we're backwards, which must just be devastating for you. But what can we do? Like, what specific options does Canada have to improve the lives of those women and girls who can't flee the country? I mean, women can't even leave right now if they're not accompanied by a man. So it wouldn't matter what we did at immigration. How can we support those women and girls who are left in Afghanistan right now?
There are all kinds of programs already happening. Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan have been at work setting up online education. A lot of that is going on, just exactly as I remember Dr. Seema Samar kept her schools open while the Taliban threatened to kill her throughout their first ruling. So there are things we can do. We can get online program going. There are ways people have found to get funds to people. It's not enough. It's a Band-Aid. But the other thing we need to do is figure out, you can't take everyone out of the country, and you can't rebuild the country if you take all the best people out. I'm thinking of your panelist, Dr. Seema Samar. How can we work to get them back in, to force the Taliban, that without them, you're not going to go anywhere. So we have to help the people inside, and while we get the really vulnerable ones out. And again, I want to say, we know how to do things like this. We have people, many of them are on your committee, that can sit down and say, we need a better plan. We know how to do it. If Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan can keep going throughout this ghastly time, then surely we can find other ways.
Do they have access to the internet in Afghanistan?
They do. Many, not all. I mean,
right.
I would say, is it correct, Dr. Samar, to say the majority probably can't read? But you know what? I have grandchildren that reading is pretty poor for them, but having a tablet in their hand is certainly moving them forward in reading. Look at the changes in that country. These girls are on the internet. They're finding out the rest of the world doesn't live like this. They were prepared to make the changes their country needed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dama, for your time. And now we'll go to Mr. Bruno Duceppe. 90 seconds, please. Go ahead.
Oh, ben, je vais essayer.
90 seconds. I'll try to make that fast. Ms. Samar, a few weeks ago, I read in the newspaper that a delegation of Talibans went to Switzerland after they were invited by an NGO. They asked for the international community to go ahead with the ISIS, if you will, of Afghanistan, but they also brought up humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. So they want to facilitate humanitarian aid for staff and goods to come to the country. Ms. Samar, what do the Taliban expect from us by doing this type of thing?
They want to save their own face. Of course, if there's aid providing in the country and Taliban is taking the responsibility that they are doing, it's their governance, although it's not their governance. The second point that I would like to mention again, that we really need to focus on education. I insist that there are NGOs that are working in the ground. It's not, everybody is not out of the country. The third point that I would like to mention on the lack of response from the Canadian immigration, I'm a recipient of Order of Canada, and they told me that I have the right to have a special immigration visa for Canada, but I didn't get response from them. So imagine
Mr. Bruno Duceppe, and we can move on to Madam Kwan.
Merci.
Please, 90 seconds, sorry. Please go ahead. Go ahead. Madam Kwan.
Oh, Mr. Bruno Duceppe is not asking his questions? Can I have his minute and a half?
No. His minute and a half is over. Yours minute and a half.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess I'll ask this in my last minute and a half. It's true to say that we can't get everyone out, but certainly we can try and get some people out, and particularly those are highly targeted, where there is literally, they're on the list to be hunted down. Now, one of the issues that I think Canada can do to bring more people to safety is to extend the family reunification process for extended family sponsorship. This is something that the Canadian government has done for Ukrainians, but they have not applied that to Afghanistan. So I'd like to get the comments from the witnesses whether or not you think the Canadian government should extend this special immigration measure to Afghans.
I think, of course, we are lobbying for it, from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the contrast between how Ukrainians have been treated and how Afghans have been treated has been very, very painful and difficult to explain, except with reference to racism and Islamophobia. Thanks.
And I agree. Why wouldn't we do that? You know, with Ukraine and Afghanistan, this is the classic good versus evil story. Mm-hmm. And heaven knows evil must not win.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Your 90 seconds is up. And I want to thank Ms. Armstrong, Ms. Barr, and Dr. Samar, the work that you do to make a wonderful women's life better. So all the best to you. On behalf of the committee members, thank you very much for your input to the committee. And now we'll suspend for a few minutes to prepare for the third and the last panel, please. Suspended. To order, and I would love to welcome our third panel this evening. From Afghan community of Vancouver, we have Mr. Wadud Dilzo, director of the organization. From Women Leaders of Tomorrow, welcome back. Madam Priba Razai, I hope your mic and system works better this time. And from the Women and Peace Studies Organization, Afghanistan, Basma Froz, please, and welcome each of you on behalf of the committee members. You have exactly 5 minutes, so please respect time. And we will start with Mr. Wadud Dilso for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am Wadud Dilsos, joining you today from the traditional and unceded land of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people called Vancouver. I am a member of Afghan community and volunteered with the Afghan Canadian Association of BC since 2005. I am also a community activist, mostly involved in refugee settlement support and advocacy for Afghan refugees and our community members. Our group is called the Afghan Community Vancouver, and it includes 1,200 families. And we also have a page that has over 4,600 followers. Since Taliban took over in Afghanistan, we received 100 calls. I was in contact with majority of these vulnerable families, men, women, requesting from our community and our government. And we have a list of these individuals that are falling into the categories that our government announced as at risk and could be resettled to Canada, including women activists, member of parliament, the provincial councils, journalists, prosecutors, judges, female doctors and nurses who work in military hospitals, Canadian Force contractors, Canadian Embassy employees and volunteer officers who were trained by and worked with Canadian military. The local Afghan community is grateful for the solidarity and commitment received from the government. What I want to emphasize today is the need to facilitate the resettlement of those at risk. UNHCR designation overseas that is needed for the resettlement takes a very long time. Families that have done their biometrics in Pakistan are waiting months for the response. As an example, I have Bejan Aryan and Nasir Fayaz, well-known TV anchors who escaped to Pakistan, are given their first appointment with UNHCR in June this year. That's a very long wait time. During the Syrian crisis, sponsorship of refugees from within the country was allowed. That's not the case for Afghans. Although for both crises, 40,000 refugees resettlement was considered, but Afghanistan population is 2 times higher than Syria, and we had a military presence in Afghanistan. A temporary resident program, issuance of work permit, study permit are a part of the response to the Ukrainian crisis, which haven't been considered in the response to the Afghan crisis. The Canadian involvement in Afghanistan was very profound in the past 20 years, and we had military presence in the country, which has created close ties between the two countries. The Afghan National Defense and Security Forces supported the Canadian mission and were fighting the international terrorism shoulder to shoulder with Canadians. We have abandoned those soldiers and officers who became the victim of wrong politics in Afghanistan and are being targeted and killed on a daily basis in the past 7 months. We do not have them as the at-risk category for the resettlement to Canada. This could be reviewed and changed. Afghan community request the following: eliminate refugee documentation request, increase the number of refugees, easing the process of acquiring temporary resident work and study visas for Afghans, allowing sponsorship of refugees from within Afghanistan, include military personnel in at-risk category to be considered for resettlement, support local Afghan organizations to become allies in refugees settlement and integration. And last, Afghan Community Vancouver is ready to collaborate with IRCC to provide support to the new refugees and their settlement and integration journey in the cultural safe way. Thank you very much.
you, Mr. Dilso. We will go to Madam Priba Rezai for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and appear before this special committee on Afghanistan this evening. My name is Freiba Rezai. I was born and raised in Afghanistan. I am one of the first Afghan women to compete at the 2004 Athens Olympic Games. I am also the first Afghan women Olympian to participate and compete in a combat sport. I am now the founder and the executive director of Women Leaders of Tomorrow. We are a registered nonprofit society in Vancouver, BC. Our mandate is to empower women and girls through sports and education. Following the return of the Taliban in August 2021, we have received countless messages from Afghan women and girls begging us to save their lives by helping them to leave Afghanistan. Among them were, and still are, successful female athletes from the volleyball, cycling, and the judo team. We were successful in assisting 148 Afghan women students to be evacuated to the United States with the help of American humanitarian organizations. However, the response from the Canadian government has been extremely disappointing. The IRCC's bureaucratic policies have made it impossible for Afghan female athletes to reach safety in Canada. On November 25, 2021, I wrote a letter to the Right Honorable Prime Minister explaining the dire situation of our female athletes and describing the human rights violations now occurring in Afghanistan. The entire Canadian women's soccer team, gold medalists from Tokyo 2020 have signed my letter. The situation for female athletes is dire in Afghanistan. Members of our teams have been threatened by the Taliban with the punishment of 100-time lashings in public or death penalty. A female member of our volleyball team, Marjabin Hakimi, was murdered under highly suspicious circumstances when the Taliban captured the capital. The Taliban government forbids women's sports as it is contrary to their strict interpretation of Sharia law. They have suppressed all athletic participation of women in public. This was the Taliban's first decree. The Taliban is hunting door to door, looking for women athletes and women who advocated for women's rights. If Canada does not evacuate them soon, they will die. Canada played a vital role in Afghanistan by advancing women's and girls' empowerment and education. Afghans are devastated to see that our rights and freedom were halted overnight. The Canadian government promised to evacuate women leaders, human rights defenders, and women athletes. Thousands of Afghan families have been evacuated to Canada, but only 15 female athletes. Many of our athletes are also students who want to pursue their higher education in Canada. These are the best, brightest young Afghans, multilingual, educated, and ambitious. They have overcome cultural and economic hardships, especially the women, to achieve ambitious goals. They have risked severe physical attacks and death to fight for equality, the right to an education, the rule of law, which Canadians take for granted here. They understand at a visceral level of fragility of democracy. Women Leaders of Tomorrow has helped many Afghan women to obtain full ride scholarships to the Canadian universities, but their study permits and student visas have been denied by the IRCC on the grounds they are unlikely to return to Afghanistan. 9 women engineers are completing their studies in Kazakhstan. They want to complete master's degree at Canadian University to qualify and to work in their professions. Their non-renewable Kazakh visas will expire in August this year. What will happen to them? They can't return home. We call We call on the Canadian government to honor its long-standing promises to these Afghan women, scholars, athletes, and human rights defenders by actively assisting their entry into Canada and by instructing the IRCC to issue study permits to fully funded Afghan refugee students. The U.S. Doha Agreement repudiated
Thank you very
every
much,
single one of
Madam
these
Razai. We will
ideals.
come back to you.
Thank
Now
you.
we're going to move on to Madam Wasma Froz. Please, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm honored to be part of this hearing, and I look forward to share my perspectives from Afghanistan and what we have been going through. The first thing I want to start with is actually a small story of my experience. So I work with a group of 200 women on daily basis in Afghanistan, and these are women peace builders, women leaders, women who have not been in the media. These are the women who have actually stopped the suicide bombers, worked with the mothers who stopped suicide bombers. These are the women who actually stopped madrasas from teaching suicide terrorism to kids, and these are the women who have gone to the Taliban jails and have freed prisoners. So these are like women leaders in the provinces, and I wouldn't get into more details of that for their security. But my partnership, the organization that I run, and its partnership with Canada has been going for so many years, at least the past 6-7 years in Afghanistan. And one of the experiences I would like to recall is that we had some of the Canadian military members who wanted to talk to women to see how they can actually start looking around issues of women and peace and security, which is Canadian mandate, but also as part of their engagement with Afghans. And I took a group of 15 women in Kandahar in a bus from the city, and I took them to the airport so that they could meet the members of the military. And I wouldn't go into details further. Imagine 15 women took that risk, because going to a military airport was not just life risk for them, but it was also, like, for a woman, it was considered to be like literally prostitution, and she would have been like literally stoned to death. But these women took the risk because they were working with a mission that we need to engage women in the security sector. That's where my organization focused. Today, all those 15 women are in Afghanistan and living in a very difficult situation, hiding from one province to the other. For the past 6 years, through Canada Fund, my organization was able to get around literally 10,000 women in the Afghan police. We had a formal engagement with Canada and Ministry of Interior, and we got women into the NATO training programs, and also within the women in the police forces. Canada has been having a long-standing women in peace and security plan, and also the mandate, and we thought that this would actually continue. But what happened actually on August 15, I don't see it as an isolated event. It didn't just happen overnight. And I'm actually surprised when I hear the officials and parliamentarians saying, oh, we were taken by surprise. No, because nobody listened to us women. We have been talking about this. We had been telling the policymakers, the global leaders, that things were going so much wrong in Afghanistan. And please listen to the women. Do not make deals with a group where you exclude the Afghan government. So the Doha deal was the start of the Afghanistan political surrender. It was not August 15. That was the Doha deal that actually gave legitimacy to a group that even did not include Afghan government as a signatory. And that was the time that things started getting very worse in local communities. And I, as an organization that I worked on the local communities, we started reporting on the fall of different districts and provinces, even right before actually even last year, before August. So I would also like to thank Canada for the announcement of the Afghan refugees. Some of my colleagues have made it to come to Canada after literally 6-7 months being in Albania, having been evacuated in Kabul directly as well, but also So we are grateful for this big support, but at the same time, I would also like to echo the concerns that I have heard from the previous panels in terms of the lack of response. My own parents had to wait for literally 7 months that we never heard anything from IRCC about the status of their case. So I would also like to start to share the challenge of the focus of the SIM, the Special Immigration Program for Afghans. I would very much like the focus to expand beyond translators and also see the number of actually women applicants, women leaders applicants, because the translators have been mostly men and in Afghanistan with the military. So it's important. So I would very much ask for, quotas and this gender disaggregation, just the way Canada talks about women leadership and as well as women in peace and security. So
Thank you very much, Madam Prose. So we'll come back to you. Now we're going to go to the honorable members. First, we'll go to Mr. Reddycop for 6 minutes. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Fro, that the last one of the last things you said, listen to the women. That's really good advice at the best of times, and even here in Canada, I think all of us need to take that advice. So, so I appreciate that, and I will work very hard in my own life to use that that advice. But I want to. I'm concerned about something, and it has to do with the facts. If you look at some facts. The government has promised 40,000 Afghan refugees, and Immigration Minister Sean Fraser told me last week at committee that we're at about 9,500 or so right now. So that's a little over, and that's in eight months, almost 9 months. That's a little over 1,000 a month. He also was quite happy to tell me that there were 10,000 Ukrainians have come to Canada in 3 months. So that's a much higher rate. And so my concern here, and I would like to get your opinion on this, is. Are we dealing with some racism issues in Canada? Is there Islamophobia? Why? And I know there's differences between people coming from Ukraine versus from Afghanistan, but do you think that some of that is at play with what's going on here? And maybe I'll start with Ms. Fro.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of operational level challenges too, the lack of systems. So the system to respond to people, but at the same time, the third country phenomenon has been very difficult for us Afghans. So right now, I have my colleagues who have travel authorization to travel to Canada, but they do not have Pakistani visa and they cannot obtain Pakistani visa. There is also political and security risks to many Afghans to travel to Pakistan. We have had members of the Afghan community, Afghans, security and other forces who were actually detained in Pakistan. So it's about the operationalization of this whole challenge. The third country is the major challenge, the system of response, and at the same time, it's also about like the lack of not just Pakistan but also lack of any Afghans going to other countries. Like look at the number of embassies open in Kabul. They cannot get visas, they cannot go. And now the Taliban have stopped women from traveling as well. So we don't have any hopes of getting to the third countries as well.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rizé, what is your thoughts on what I was asking about possible racism and Islamophobia?
I'm a Canadian citizen now. I'm very proud and I'm honored to be given the citizenship. I love it here very much. But it just points me to a great extent to see that racism exists, and it's ability to separate Afghans from the Ukrainians, given the history and the fact that we both have been the victims of the same troll here. Afghans share the pain of Ukrainian folks because Russian occupation did brutal things to Afghans. The only difference is that back then, because the world did not have social media or the internet connection, they could not advocate and they could not broadcast in 2 seconds what was going on. But now people in Ukrainian can. So yes, that is the fact what is happening. When here in Canada, we hear that human rights are universal. Actually, it's not. When it comes to the human rights, people pick and choose. It became a buffet for people to help some certain people and help don't help certain people. And what we have been seeing, and I have been personally witnessing since August last year, that certain group of people, actually one group of people, have monopolized the IRCC. They have been only evacuating and focusing on the, as Wajma mentioned, male interpreters. As much as we would like to see those families seek refuge and find safety in Canada, it's also important to focus on female leaders, female athletes. Let's check the comparison. 9,000 people, 9,000 families versus 15 female athletes. That is unacceptable, and we need to open the category. We need to reach out, because Canada gave us the definition of people at risk: high vulnerable people. People come from ethnic minorities, Hazara people, LGBTQ people, and women athletes. We need to help everybody at the same time, because there's a space for everyone. There's a space for Ukrainian folks. There's a space for women leaders.
Ms. Razai, another question on that. You mentioned that you had women with full ride scholarships, but the visas were denied. Were we talking about like one or two people, or like how many cases do we have of that?
I'm talking about 20 plus students at the moment. They have even received acceptance letter from very, very good, reputable universities like Simon Fraser Universities, UBC, University of Calgary, but their visas have been denying on the grounds that they will not return home. What I would like to suggest to the Canadian government and IRCC is to start a pilot project for the student visas, because these are the youngest and the brightest people that will rebuild Afghanistan. Afghanistan relies on them. We need to invest in these people to equip them with the education, and they will become the leaders of tomorrow, because we know what's happening. We have been devastated what has been happening in my home country. My own brother was beaten by the Taliban. We're ethnic Hazara minority, so we have been the victim of the Taliban directly, and we want to see that change by the IRCC as soon as possible.
Thank you very much,
you.
Mr. Redikop, and we'll move to Sister Ms. Jahid for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all our three witnesses. My first question is to all the three witnesses, and I would just like to focus on the challenge of getting people currently in Afghanistan that need our protection out of the country and on their way to safety, especially the vulnerable women and girls. We know it's not as easy as just booking a flight. The Associated Press reported this weekend that the Taliban are refusing to allow women to board flights if they are not accompanied by a male guardian. So could you speak to the challenges women and girls, especially those households without men, face in leaving the country, and what can Canada do to help them? If I can start with Ms. Farrow.
Thank you. I very much think you are also talking about the war widows. We have like 2 million of these women who are living in different parts of the country, and they are literally, they do not have any male members of the family because they have lost male members of the family to the war. So they literally do not have any means to get out of the country. They could have, like, evacuations could have been only one way, or for example, there could be some special measures where they could be provided, a visa to a third country, and then that third country would take the case further. Other than that, I'm also thinking about the importance of engaging with Afghanistan, because how many people you can evacuate, how many people you can sponsor to Canada. We have 40 million population, so I very much think Canada needs to plan its engagement in Afghanistan. Do you, if you really kind of care about the communities left behind, it's important to. I work with 200 women on daily basis. There are many organizations engaged on the ground, and also focus should be on putting pressure on the Taliban. The Taliban need to be pressured into accepting today's Afghanistan.
If I can ask Mr. Dilsoz to please provide his point of view.
I think that it's a big challenge for Afghan women. I daily speak with many of women in Afghanistan, that they are talking about this challenge, that they cannot leave the country without the mail. And the only way that I think we could offer is that a third party who could speak with the Taliban, and there has to be a pressure put on the Taliban in order to accept these measures.
Ms. Razai?
Thank you so much, Madam Zahid. That's the fact that Taliban has imposed strict Sharia law on Afghan women. They require women to be accompanied by a mahram, by a male guardian, as soon as she leaves home. But what I would suggest to IRCC is that IRCC needs to focus on its job, needs to do its work, needs to issue those visas on for the applicants that they have applied. Let the Afghans to figure out and take care of their business on the ground, because Afghans are very good. We can maneuver ourselves on the ground. We will take care of arranging a mahram and making sure that they will go to the airport safely, to the border safely. All we are asking from the government is to give them those visas. Actually, people in the panel and myself and my family and so many other volunteers, and we call ourselves the sleep-deprived volunteers, we share the burden of IRCC's work. We are providing government solution because we are doing most of the paperwork. We are the people who are helping them with the allowances, cash, money for food, money for rent on the ground. The government just needs to issue the visas for them. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Razai. My next question is for Ms. Farrow. Close to 10,000 Afghans have already arrived in Canada. Can you please explain how countries can prioritize who to resettle, given that there are millions of vulnerable Afghans and that one country alone cannot resettle all vulnerable Afghans?
Thank you. I think the vulnerability of each group is different. For example, the young women right now, and we have the young women who in all the sectors, women in sports, women in businesses, women in media, for example. So young women should be as a category that should be, provided priority for the visas. Women led households, families, like women, older women who have like kids that they have to look after, and at the same time, ethnic minorities, for example, the Hazaras, the Shias, for example, Uzbeks in Afghanistan, the ethnic minorities also need to be provided, opportunities. So I very much think Canada needs to broaden its scope beyond just the translators, and also the partners. As I said before, the women that I've worked with Canadian military, they are right now inside Afghanistan stack. So, we don't know how to get answers. We don't know how to get connected.
Okay. Like any other barriers women and girls are facing in the relocation and resettlement process?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
So yes, the challenge of the going to another country still applies to them as well, because they cannot travel, on their own, or for example, if they do not have a visa arranged. So the importance of engaging Qatar or Pakistan politically is so much important to get these women out.
Thank you very much, Sister Jahid. And we'll move to Mr. Brunel Desep for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would also like to thank the witnesses that are with us today. Your expertise will help us do better, and that is the point of this study. We need to do better. Ms. Volga, I heard you speak already. You were very interesting, as is the case for all the witnesses. But at the beginning of this study, you've already spoken about minorities. And there was Mr. Mirzad was an Hazara community representative. That situation marked me, and there is a sentence here. It was said that Mr. Azara's life in Afghanistan is that he's simply waiting to be executed. He's on the run. And I think that sentence is true more than ever today. And I think that that's what most Hazara Afghans or other Afghans live today. So are you saying that the situation What can you tell us about the situation currently in Afghanistan?
Oui, oui.
Thank you. So basically on the daily reports, I actually collect a lot of reports and that share with the Security Council and members of the government in Canada as well. Basically, what you hear in the media, the restrictions, women have been literally banned from the public. So you do not see women in government and in any jobs. Women have been banned from any non-government spaces as well. At the same time, the community members, for example, are facing challenges of, for example, cannot going around, or the women have been stopped from going to even traveling without a mahram. But there are different vulnerable groups. As I said before, the ethnic minorities are there. The Tajiks themselves, like Tajiks is another ethnic, it's not an ethnic minorities, but it's one of the ethnicities that is very much under, attacked by the Taliban. And on daily basis, we get, reports of killings of people. So the media has been banned. This week, BBC and Voice of America, all of them were stopped in Afghanistan. The media has been banned, and we are afraid that in some days we would actually lose the internet as well, and then we would never hear what was going on inside Afghanistan. So the situation is as terrible as I'm actually talking about. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rezai, now I have a question for you. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for all the work that you do. It's very important work. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll ask my question quickly now. How many women athletes from Afghanistan have been accepted to Canada today?
Much, Mr. Duceppe. Only 15 female athletes so far. Our volleyball team, cycling team, and judo team, they are all in hiding, either in Afghanistan or in Pakistan. They're actually sending me messages every day. Many of them have applied to IRCC, and they even received letters and responses from IRCC, but they still haven't received their visas to be able to travel to Canada. And one good example is that one of our judo athletes whose house was raided by the Taliban, and the Taliban searched her house looking for any documents that she had as athlete ID, so the Taliban could use it against her. And we have 18 years old waiting for her study permit in Pakistan, who has been accepted at all girls boarding school in Canada with full ride scholarship, and she wants to become the first Afghan female president. She's stuck in Pakistan, and she's all by herself. She has completed her biometrics, all her application and everything. She's just in the limbo now. I would love to see her that she has received a response from the Canadian High Commission or from the third party in Abu Dhabi, where they process student visas. The situation is dire. We need to.
Oh, pardon. Mais ce qui est important.
But what is important for us, for the committee, when we write our final report, everything that you tell us tonight is very important, because all of that will be included in the report. So it is important for us to know why these athletes, why this is happening. Are they at risk in Afghanistan because they are athletes? We need to know this.
So much for asking me that question, Mr. Duceppe. I appreciate it. The reason that the Taliban has banned women's sport is because women's sport is forbidden under the Taliban Sharia law, because it sends sexual vibes to men, and that brings visibility to women's body, women's sport, and that is haram according to their interpretation of Sharia law, not the modern Islam. So therefore, they're at high risk. They're in danger. One of our member of volleyball team has been murdered suspiciously when the Taliban took over, and the rest are in hiding. One of our member of the volleyball team recently sent me a picture of herself. Taliban has found her, and they beaten her, and she had bruises all over her body. What I would like to see is that Canada to honor its promise. Canada promised that they will evacuate women leaders and human rights defenders. And athletes are human rights defenders, because I was a human rights defender, because my participation at the Olympic Games for the first time, I was the first Afghan woman brought back Afghanistan to world arena, world sport after the fall of the Taliban for the first time. And that inspired hundreds of Afghan women to join sports. And it was a sports revolution. Now we are all going backward. When the Taliban returned, it felt like Afghanistan was hit by a giant meteorite and set us back 30 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno.
Permettez-moi, Monsieur le Président, juste de dire à quel point.
I simply want to say something. I simply want to say that what Ms. Rezai has said is extremely important. We all have kids, we all have girls. I have 2 girls in sports. They play volleyball, they play soccer, and nobody will ever prevent them from doing this. And what we are hearing today is very important, and we need to underscore this.
Mr. Bruno Duceppe, we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our witnesses for your presentation and for your knowledge of what's going on there. I'd like to first go to Ms. Rezai on your comment. You indicated that if the Canadian government provided a temporary residence permit to Afghans, they will be able to get to a third country and then be able to come to Canada. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Ms. Kwan. As I mentioned previously as well, that all we need is those solid exclusive visas. There are so many Afghan families and Afghan athletes who don't even need to be on the IOM or IRCC flights. They can even arrange their flights themselves. All we need is just those temporary residency or any visa or any travel document, any permission that allows them to come and seek refuge in Canada so they can be alive.
The athletes that you've talked about, the women that you've talked about to which applications been submitted but is sitting idle in IRCC's system, when did they apply?
We have applied for their applications August last year. As soon as the government collapsed, we started contact the government because we knew what's going to come in, what was coming, and we needed to reach out to the Canadian government as soon as possible. And their applications are still pending. We have received a confirmation from IRCC that they have the list of our volleyball team, but they're not doing anything about it. They probably use it as souvenir. I'm sorry, but they are not using anything about it. But they confirm that they have the list. They even have the names of our volleyball teams. And my question is that when can they assure that the volleyball team will be safely evacuated to Canada?
Have they been given file numbers?
Absolutely not, no.
So they're just sitting there?
But they have received the list.
All
yes,
right.
they're just sitting in the IRCC
Thank you.
office.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Mr. Dilwazou now, please. My understanding is that you've also submitted a long list of individuals, Afghans, who need to get to safety. Did any of them receive a file number from the government or response from the government?
They received only a confirmation, but it was automated confirmation, but they haven't received anything, zero response.
And when did the application or the contact made with IRCC?
So as far as I have many people in my list, some of them, they started from August 15, 16, and upwards. So the dates are different.
Okay. So, but none of them has received a response. Now, to the question around being able to leave Afghanistan and then to get to a third country, if they were given a travel visa or temporary residence permit from the Canadian government, would you agree that if that was done, Afghans would be able to get to a third country? I mean, fraught with risks. I'm not trying to minimize that, but would they have some capacity to do that? Or is that a reason for the government then to say, well, they can't even get to a third country, so there's no reason why they should process their applications?
So I have some of these individuals, as the IRCC suggested me, if they go to third country, they will be able to help them. So like few of them left Afghanistan. I can say some journalists, one of them, Mr. Lashkari, he's a very well-known anchor, but none of them received any type of help, response. And when they applied to UNHCR, as we were suggested by IRCC, the waiting list to meet them in UNHCR is months.
Thank you. Aside from the government needing to waive the refugee determination requirement, one of the other things that's a roadblock for Afghans to get to safety is the fact that the government requires them to be in a third country. Otherwise, I think that's why they're not processing their application. And then to all the witnesses, would you say that what the government must do at this point in time is to change that immigration requirement and to say that Afghans do not need to be in a third country in order to make their application? I will start in going backwards with Ms. Frog, who has not spoken just yet.
Yes, absolutely. If for example, they are given, a kind of a travel authorization, because many of my colleagues received during the August evacuations, they received travel authorizations. So if that could be provided, or the temporary, permits, those they will arrange somehow, like with all the risks, they will somehow arrange to go, or maybe even from Afghanistan to go to another country. So that is one step towards addressing it. Like in August and September, my organization submitted 45 women who have been working with Canadian military in Afghanistan, who have implemented Canada Fund projects with Canada's embassy. None of those women have made it to Canada, and we have not heard a word from them. Even Canada's ambassadors have been involved. They were contacting IRCC on our behalf, but nothing yet.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. And we'll go to the second round. 3 minutes for Ms. Finley, and then 3 minutes for Ms. Damoff, and 90 seconds for Mr. Bruner de Sepp, and 90 seconds for Madam Kwan. So we'll start with Ms. Finley for 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have 3 minutes, so I have to ask you for quick answers. Ms. Rea, as I understand your testimony, you say that only 15 women athletes have made it from Afghanistan to Canada. I'm concerned that the government is not understanding the urgency of the Afghan situation. Can you say to us, why are women athletes at such high risk in Afghanistan?
Thank you very much for that question. Taliban forbids women's sports, as I mentioned, because it sends sexual vibe to men, and it brings visibility to women's body, and brings visibility to women in general. Therefore, it's forbidden for them. And therefore, their lives are at risk, because Taliban see women athletes as those people, or people in the society, who corrupt the young, who corrupt the Islam, and who act against Islam, which is unacceptable by their government. And
so they are at risk of death. Am I correct?
Absolutely. So the punishment to play sport under the Taliban regime is being 100 times lashed or death penalty.
Thank you.
And our athletes have been receiving many letters from the Taliban with the threats that they would be either punished publicly or they will be executed.
Thank you. Mr. Dilsos, how many Afghan refugees have arrived in the Vancouver area since the return of the Taliban in Afghanistan?
As far as I have met with around 400 or 500 of them.
And what type of supports does your organization provide them?
We provide shelters for them. And also what we do is communicating with them cultural way in order to introduce them the Canadian culture. And also we work with their kids, schooling, and also we invite them to our when we have some events, they're coming to our events in order to get introduced with the Afghan Canadians here in Vancouver.
Can you just tell me, do you have capacity for more to help more Afghan refugees?
We have some volunteers that they want to work with us, but still we need some support from the government. As I mentioned in my statement, we need support from the government to help us.
But you're willing, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may add on that, yes, there are so many volunteers who love to raise the capacity and to welcome new Afghan refugees.
Thank you very much, Madam Finley. And we will go to Madam Demoff for 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. Ms. Farrell, you talked about how women can't leave the home without being accompanied by a male. And the number of Afghan women who are currently widowed. We also know that Afghanistan has one of the highest rates of people living with disabilities in the world. And so those women may actually have a male living in the house, but are unable to go out because that spouse is living with a disability. How could Canada get those women out of the country? And the second part would be, if we can't get them out of the country, how can Canada, what specific options could you give to us to be able to support those women and their families, because they can no longer work and they may not be able to leave the country?
Thank you. This is a point that I'm working every day on, that, we have 40 million Afghans left behind and all of them will not be evacuated. So we need to find ways to help them. And one of that is that Canada needs to have a plan on how to engage with Afghanistan. One is, of course, the evacuations and the immigration of the refugees, but at the same time, it's also how Canada continues its engagement. So I propose, as a female special envoy from Canada, I request you that the government works on a female envoy for Afghanistan that actually starts engaging with the Taliban and starts, discussions on how to get into, support to these women, because yes, the joblessness is challenging. Of course, the humanitarian crisis is there, but also you need to, the women organizations are active in the country despite all the challenges. So there is need for continued funding for them, resources for them.
Can I ask you something though, because on our previous panel, and I don't know if you were watching or not, but one of the witnesses there said that we should absolutely not be engaging with the Taliban because it legitimizes them. So
I very much, because I work with so many women on the ground and I see that, millions of Afghans are actually starving. So that is my, continued advocacy that we need to engage with the Taliban, but that does not mean recognition. There is a need for tight, criteria attached to an engagement. And that engagement should mean, public diplomacy, should mean putting pressure, should also mean supporting national and international organizations.
So is there any way to get these women out of Afghanistan? No? Is there any? I only have 15 seconds left.
Yes, there is. You need to work with third parties and other women organizations.
But if they can't leave without a male, how do we get them out?
We will find ways. We have to find ways. Yes,
Okay.
We will have to find ways.
Thank you for all your work, and thank you to all the witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Demoff. We will go to Mr. Bruno Desep for 90 seconds, please.
Well, 90 seconds, it's not a lot of time, but first, thank you to the witnesses for being here. I will give you the final word. Mr. Dilaz, Ms. Rezaei, Ms. Frog, what are your number one priorities for us?
Okay,
I wanted to add on Ms. Farouk's point that engaging with the Taliban, this is the time where Canada needs to listen to Afghans because we know what works, what doesn't work in Afghanistan. The reason that the Western countries and NGOs collapsed in Afghanistan because they didn't work with the Afghans. We need to work with the Afghans if you want support. And to answer Mr. Dusep's question, the number one priority is visas for our female athletes, and study permits to our students.
Madame Frog.
For me, the number one, there would be two number one priorities. The one is to actually put a quota for 50% women applicants within the 40,000, allocation that you have for women leaders and young women. And the second top priority is that Canada needs to appoint a female envoy for Afghanistan that we can talk to on regular basis.
I would add that we have to change the measure as we have the same measure for the Ukraine. So we have to foresee that for Afghanistan as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Decep.
Merci à vous tous. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you very much.
To Madam Kwan, please.
Thank you. I want to go back to the last question because one of the huge roadblocks for people to get out is the immigration measure that requires for people to be already in a third country. And without the temporary travel permit, they cannot get to a third country. So my question then to Ms. Rezai and then to Mr. Duzeau is this: should the government change the special immigration measure that requires Afghans to be in a third country in order to access immigration supports?
Absolutely, it has to be changed. And as we talk right now, we speak, someone is getting tortured or someone is being killed. And this is unfortunate. I think we have to change these measures.
Ms. Rezai?
Absolutely. What asking the Canadian government is doable and also achievable. So please remove the third country requirement as well as the documents from UNHCR, because our female athletes are in Islamabad at the moment, but they can't have any document from UNHCR in order to qualify for the IRCC application. So our need is very basic and also very doable.
Thank you. You mentioned very quickly that students, if they apply for a student visa from Afghanistan, then they get rejected because IRCC says that they don't believe that they will return to their home country. What would you suggest that the government should do with respect to that?
I think that currently most of the students that are coming to Canada, I mean, half of them, they're staying in Canada. They don't leave. They work here and they continue living in here. So it's not the case. It's only
Madam Kwan and
Mr. Chair, sorry about that. Could I get the witnesses then to submit their answers to me to that question, please? They didn't get a chance to answer.
Sure.
If they could do that, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. And I want, on behalf of the committee members, I want to thank the witnesses, the work that you do in the lives of most vulnerable and sharing your thoughts with us today. Appreciate that. All the best to you. And also on the behalf of members, I would love to thank the interpreters for staying for 3 long hours. It's not easy, and particularly with accent from people like myself. And I also want to thank the technical support staff, of course, our Madam Clerk, analysts, and the staff from the Members of Parliament office. Work well done, and thank you. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting now.
Thank you. Thank you.